by itself. Nolan Ryan, George Brett, and Robin Yount. For the first time since Cooperstown's first class of 1936, when 5 were inducted, 3 got the call in their first year of eligibility.
I had a few phone calls between 11 and 12, but it wasn't the one I was expecting or hoping. And finally, I got the call. Very, very special.
These players had special careers and overwhelming support. Ryan was named on 98.79% of the ballots, that's second all time. Brett was also named on 98% of the 497 ballots cast by the Baseball Writers Association of America.
I think the first time you go there and really kind of just see the history of the game and all the great players there, that as a player, you really realize how special that is.
There's no doubt that these former players belong among baseball's immortals. From 1973 to 1993, Brett was the American League's premier third baseman. Spending his entire career with the Royals, Brett led KC to the postseason 7 times and played on Kansas City's 1985 World Series champions. He had more than 3,100 hits with 317 homers and was league MVP in 1980 when he batted .390. Like Brett, Yount is also in the exclusive 3,000 hit club and played 2 decades for just one franchise, the Milwaukee Brewers. Yount was twice American League MVP, first as a shortstop in 1982 when he led Milwaukee to the American League pennant, and again in 1989 as a center fielder. Brett and Yount are also their franchise's all-time leaders in singles, doubles, triples, and home runs. The only other players to do that are Willie Mays and Stan Musial, also first-time ballot Hall of Famers.
I basically played the game as hard as I could possibly play it each time I went out there, and left it at that. You know, I've never been big on statistics or anything like that.
Nolan Ryan's statistics can't be ignored, like 7 for the number of no-hitters he threw. No one else tossed more than 4. Or how about 5,714 career strikeouts, tops all time? Or 324 victories and an incredible 27 seasons for a hard-throwing pitcher with 4 teams. Ryan is also baseball's all-time best in fewest hits allowed per 9 innings, an opponent's batting average, and held or shared 53 major league records when he retired. But even with such lofty achievements, these men were left humbled by Tuesday's honor.
I think everybody that ever played the game as a youngster, little leaguer, high school player, minor league baseball player, major league baseball player, has a dream. And that dream is to make it to the Hall of Fame. I wish everybody in this room could feel as good as I feel right now. It is so special.
Well, Tony Perez missed in his 8th try and received fewer votes than he did last year, while Carlton Fisk was close, 43 votes shy of induction, but he should make it in next year in the thin class of 2000.
4 no-hitters. When he was 32 years old, the Angels decided he wasn't worth $1 million a year. Houston did. When he was 41 years old, the Astros decided he just had to be finished. They let him sign with the Rangers. He struck out 300 guys the first year there and threw the last 2 of his 7 no-hitters. Today, finally, somebody believed in Nolan Ryan long-term. 491 votes, and he leads George Brett and Robin Yount into the Baseball Hall of Fame in what might be Cooperstown's greatest class since year 1 in 1936. When Ryan reached the majors, Walter Johnson held the all-time record with 3,508 strikeouts. Nolan Ryan Jr. struck out 5,714 guys. On the other hand, he only finished 32 games over 500. George Brett got 3 fewer votes than Ryan, the last man to seriously flirt with 400 when he hit 390 in 80, 13 other 300 seasons in KC. And he and the third electee, Robin Yount, 2 of only 15 men in baseball history to spend 20 or more seasons all in one uniform. Well, they washed it frequently. Here's the kid from Alvin, Texas.
I'll be looking forward to the inductions in Cooperstown. I think that today is just the start of it. It really doesn't, I don't think, dawn on you the significance of this, and it really does kind of top off my career.
Marm feels real good. There are perhaps 100 Cooperstown-worthy guys. 3 made it in, the top 3 on your list here. The cutoff, 373 votes. Yount just made it. The great catcher Pudge Fisk, 43 short. Tony Perez, the only other guy on the ballot over 300 votes. Perez, the cause celeb among us baseball historians, actually got further away this year, 302 votes. 321 last year. The great Reds first baseman dismissed because he's never MVP'd or been the league RBI or homer champ. But consider this. From the years 1965 through 1981, his 17 years as an everyday major leaguer, Doggy Perez not only drove in more runs than everybody else in the majors, he drove in 100 more runs than everybody else in the majors. That's a Hall of Famer, voters. The rest of your top 10, Carter, Garvey, Rice, Bruce Sutter, and Jim Cott. Later on Fox Sports News, we'll be joined by Nolan Ryan, Hall of Famer Nolan Ryan.
Leading for most for Nolan Ryan, George Brett, and Robin Yount. Fame is forever. This rookie trio was voted into the Hall of Fame Tuesday in its first try. And if you remove the first Hall of Fame class back in 1936, only 29 players have been taken in the first year of eligibility, but never more than 2 at a time. Nolan Ryan came within 1 vote of receiving the highest percentage in history, as he was named on just under 99% of the ballots. He held or shared 53 Major League records when he retired back in 1993. He said his Hall of Fame plaque would likely find him in a Texas Rangers hat.
I was fortunate to play in a lot of different cities for different organizations under different circumstances, and very positive things happened at each and every stop that I made. But I think when I view back on my career, probably the thing I get the most satisfaction out of is my longevity and being able to maintain the style of pitcher I was my entire career. Because of that longevity, I got a lot of opportunities. I got a lot of opportunities to meet a lot of different people, play with a lot of different people, play against a lot of different people. I switched leagues twice, so I feel like I was very fortunate that over more than a 25-year span that I faced all the great hitters in the game of baseball.
Besides having the most strikeouts lifetime, Ryan also has more double-digit strikeout games than anyone else. In fact, we went back and looked at the numbers and added up his total and then added up the total of Randy Johnson and Roger Clemens. Ryan has more double-digit strikeout games than those two combined. Ryan also holds the record for 10 strikeouts or more in a game in a season. Back in 1973, he struck out 10 or more 23 times. George Brett, whose pine tar bat is already in Cooperstown, was a 13-time All-Star during his 21-year career. He was a .305 hitter during a career that was spent entirely in one city, Kansas City. His 3,154 hits leaves him 13th on the all-time list.
In all honesty, my wife told me that if I was going to be elected to the Hall of Fame, that I'd probably get a phone call about 11 o'clock. And then about 12 o'clock, one of the Royals PR guys was over at the house. He said, well, they told me it'd be closer to 12, and then about 12:20, I finally got the call. And it was all that anticipation of, you know, do the writers think you were good enough or not? And then when I heard the vote total and the percentage, I mean, I just lost it. I couldn't believe that the reporters throughout the country thought that much of me as a baseball player. The older you get and the more you play and they start writing articles about you and they say future Hall of Famer, you kind of think it's flattering, but you always hold your breath, and I can quit holding it as of 12:20 today.
From 1975 till 1990, no one had a better batting average or more doubles than Brett. Over that same span, he was second in triples to teammate Willie Wilson, second in hits to Yount, and trailing only Mike Schmidt in slugging percentage. Speaking of Mr. Yount, like Brett, a member of the 3,000 hit club, and like Brett, spent his entire career playing in one city. He was a 3-time All-Star who won his league MVP awards at 2 different positions, shortstop and center field.
It's something that I never, in my wildest dreams, anticipated ever happening. I basically played the game as hard as I could possibly play it each time I went out there, and left it at that. You know, I've never been big on statistics or anything like that. I just really enjoyed the competition of the game. And after 20 years of playing, this is my reward, and it couldn't be better.
Yount posted solid numbers at 2 very different positions. He won an MVP at both shortstop and center field and finished with nearly identical Triple Crown stats at those positions. So after the votes were tabulated, we decided that we would ask you on ESPN.com who should have gotten in.
There were no computers to calculate luxury taxes, and who knew that in 1979, when Ryan became baseball's first $1 million a year man, 19 years later, Kevin Brown would become baseball's first $100 million man. Ryan's 300-plus wins, 5,714 strikeouts, 7 no-hitters. Brett's 3,154 hits, MVP award, and batting titles in 3 different decades. Yount's MVP awards at 2 different positions and 3,142 hits prove that in many ways the 3 helped define the positions they played, and to a degree, the game itself, which then was much more about baseball and less about the bottom line.
Everybody respected each other, and there was no petty jealousies, and we went out there to win ball games and didn't care who drove in the runs or who scored the runs or who got the win or who got the save.
Lynn Nolan Ryan, born the last day of January 1947 in the state of Texas, discovered by a Met scout while pitching for his high school team. Ryan's velocity and natural motion were most attractive. In 1969, Ryan made the only World Series appearance of his career, earning a save in Game 3 with the amazing Mets. 2 years later, he was traded to the California Angels. He pitched there for 8 years and called the move a fresh start. Unlike the Mets, the Angels used him strictly as a starting pitcher. His first season, 1972, Ryan struck out 329 batters and won 19 games. Over the next 7 seasons, he would strike out an average of 298 batters. He also threw 4 no-hitters. His first was on May 15, 1973, against the Kansas City Royals. It was on that day that George Howard Brett celebrated his 20th birthday. It was 2 years later that fans in Kansas City got a real taste of what George Brett would offer over the next 2 decades. In 1975, Brett batted over 300 for the first time. He would do that 10 more times in his career. His greatest legacy will be his flirtation with 400. In 1980, he had Ted Williams and everyone else watching. Brett finished the season with a .390 batting average. The same year that Brett was a rookie in Kansas City, a scrawny 18-year-old kid from Illinois took over the shortstop position in Milwaukee. Robin Yount committed 44 errors in the second season, but his attitude towards the game and his tenacious work ethic assured Yount of the same job security in Milwaukee that Brett enjoyed in Kansas City and Ryan on the pitcher's mound.
George Brett has always been the player that, that I watched play. He and I became very close over the years, and to go in with George, like I said, it couldn't be better.
Of all the people that I played baseball against, in the 20 years, I never enjoyed playing against anybody as much as Robin. So I was very happy for him.
All 3 players performed their best when it was needed most. Game 3 of the '78 League Championship Series in New York, Brett blasted 3 consecutive home runs off Catfish Hunter. Brett carried the Royals into the postseason 7 times. A lifetime .337 postseason hitter, and on the biggest stage, Brett shined. Twice Kansas City would reach the World Series. In 1980, then again in '85, when they beat St. Louis in 7 games. Over his 20-year career, Robin Yount went to the series only once, in 1982. That year, Yount led the league in hits, total bases, slugging percentage, and doubles. He hit .414 in the Sud series that the Cardinals won in 7. All 3 left indelible images on the game. George Brett for his pine tar incident, Robin Yount for his mastery of the 2 most difficult positions in baseball, shortstop and center field. Nolan Ryan for his ability to keep the Express chugging along. His 7th no-hitter came when he was 44 years old.
That's it! Number 7 is in the books. The remarkable Ryan has done it again.
When I view back on my career, probably the thing I get the most satisfaction out of is my longevity. And being able to maintain the style of pitcher I was my entire career.
As long as I was putting in everything I possibly had into every game, and feel like I was able to do that more often than not, it was probably the most rewarding thing.
Robin Yount played in pain. Nolan Ryan inflicted it. George Brett dealt with it. Yount, along with Paul Molitor and Jim Gantner, defined the Brewers from the mid-'70s to the early '90s. Brett did the same in Kansas City, and save for Tom Landry, Texas honors Nolan Ryan like no one else. Now baseball's Hall of Fame honors 3 men who played the game with unbridled passion and purpose.
Carl, thanks to Nolan Ryan was second only to Tom Seaver for being named on the highest percentage of ballots, 98.79. So we put this question out to you, the computer hacker. Of the players that we predict might get into the Hall of Fame one day, which one might go unanimous? Answers Roger Clemens, he's the leader, 32.9, and the respondents said he'd be the one. It's an unscientific poll and is recorded for training purposes.
Breakdown is